I'm Matt, and this is my first entry in a new series I'm calling Matt's Dharma Corner. And the point here is that I wanted to be able to speak frankly, as I do if I keep a diary entry, since I'm really, at least in the time that I'm recording this, speaking to an empty room. So I'm speaking to myself. But I realized, as I was contemplating over many years whether or not I want to be very public with my innermost thoughts, that in reality, I'm always speaking to myself, because there is only the one self. And I thought that it might be helpful for some of you to hear how it feels on my end and some of my thoughts and experiences as a spiritual seeker and a spiritual finder, if you will, and a teacher and a family man. So I am the executive director of Heaven Earth Circle. My wife is the managing director. Basically, we're co-directors. And her name is Hiromi, and you will be hearing from her at some point. We teach meditation and spiritual practices from the world's great mystery traditions at a local sangha, and we're located in Eugene, Oregon, in the United States. And we really love working with people in the real, in the flesh. We teach biodynamic craniosacral work as well, and also Hunyuan, Taiji, and Qigong from the Taoist tradition. And my wife is a musician of, in my opinion, some talent, and she loves to sing Sanskrit mantra. So why am I coming here today? Besides a brief intro to the circle, I wanted to talk about my awakening. And I've hesitated for many years to speak publicly about this, and for a variety of reasons. But what I've realized is that it's important to share our truth, and that it might be helpful. And if there's just a little chance that somebody can benefit from this, then it's worth my time. And hopefully it's worth your time. So I had many spiritual experiences before this, and I've been on the path, so I'm 48 now, I've been on the path since I was 18, quite intensely. When I discovered there was something beyond my mind that could possibly give me lasting satisfaction, I was all in. And that happened through the use of chemical help. But more than that, it was an inner calling. And the kinds of experiences that I had in my youth before I became a disciplined meditator still echo in my experiences today. So we can find the truth in many places, and that's one thing that I want everyone to realize, is that the truth of who you are is already with you, as you've probably heard if you're into this kind of thing, and you can find it anywhere. Like I said, I'm a family man. Hiromi and I have been a couple for 25 years, and through our relationship, I've discovered many, many, many things about myself, about others, about the nature of this world that we find ourselves in. Ultimately, I'll start at the end and then work back to the middle somewhere. What I have found is that as Rumi puts it, in this bazaar, there's only one buyer. And what that means is there's only one self. But that self is not who we think we are. It's something far grander and far more intimate than even our own thoughts. So when we find the self, we find ourselves in our heart, not in our head. But we also cannot deny our head. We must understand our head. And we cannot deny our body. We must respect and love our body. Because it is the body, mind, world display that is the play of God. It is the divine dance. It is the sacred symphony. It is why we're here. We're not here just to get away from here. One of my teachers would call that the up and outer path. We're here both to recognize that this is a passing show and to fall madly and deeply in love with it. To recognize it as our own heart. To be affected by the suffering of the world. And to respond as our intuition, each of us has a unique voice, a unique resonance, a unique divine role. So my awakening, I date it to October 7th through 11th of 2009. And at the time, my wife and children were in Japan, visiting her family. She's born and raised in Japan, in southern Japan. And I was getting ready to go on a meditation retreat with my teacher. And I was reading a text called The Cycle of the Day and the Night by Namkai Norbu, a Tibetan Dzogchen Rinpoche who's since passed. And I was in my acupuncture clinic. I'm an acupuncturist. And I remember looking across the room. I have a calligraphy of the Heart Sutra in Tibetan in the form of an arrow that a friend of mine did for me when I opened my practice in my hometown here at Eugene. And I looked across at the Heart Sutra, and all of a sudden, something opened in my mind. I'd been contemplating non-duality. I'd been contemplating the non-separation between the observer, consciousness, and the observed phenomena. And through the instructions in Namkai Norbu's text, and through the grace of God, or the goddess, the mother, and my teachers, something opened in my head. And that was on the 7th of October, 2009. And then there was, all of a sudden, I found myself in a good mood that didn't go away. And I kept contemplating and kept watching as phenomena and consciousness did their display. And I also noticed that there was a lot of internal energies and feelings in the body that I could be with and recognize and let go. And I think it was helped by the fact that my family, I had young children at the time, they're now young adults, but they still live with us. They're attending college now. They were away. So it gave me time to process in a way that I think sometimes when we're in the middle of family life can be quite challenging. So I had enough space, I had enough stillness, I had enough time, and then I went on retreat. And somewhere around the second or third day of the retreat, October 11th, I was walking by myself in the woods around Cloud Mountain Retreat Center, and it occurred to me that the suffering that I experienced in my heart, which I recognized in the world as the world's suffering, and just bear with me here, but that includes war and starvation and the horrors that are done to women and children, and the general lack of love of a materialist culture that seeks to sell those things that should be given freely and seeks to take what isn't theirs to take. That's what I mean by the world sorrow. I recognized in my heart that that sorrow was of one piece with the redemptive love of unity, of the divine spark of the cosmos that's in my heart, that's in your heart, that makes the whole show, makes the whole experience of creation. And I found that profoundly liberating, and my sobs as I had gone to my knees on this forest path, as I rised up back to my feet, turned into not a laughter at anything, but a laughter at myself, a humor, a divine humor. They call it the divine joke. But you have to really experience it to understand it. It's not something that you can understand with the mind. You have to get to the heart of suffering to feel this transcendental enjoyment of the path of separation to reunion. Okay, so that was 13 and a half years ago. And then I found myself still an acupuncturist, still a family man, still a Tai Chi teacher. And then shortly thereafter, I was asked by my teacher to start teaching at the Center for Sacred Sciences, which is a local interfaith nondual mystery school that has a very well-designed and carefully worked out series of practices and a way of speaking about the truth in a non-sectarian approach. So I did that for 10 years. Well, in 2020, because of the events of the world, it became clear to my wife and I that it was time for us to begin our own ministry. Meanwhile, she had had her own awakening several years after mine. And that was how Heaven Earth Circle was born. But what I also discovered in that process of living a family life is that an initial kensho, as they say in Japanese Zen Buddhism, is an opening that must be deepened and integrated. And so what we have come to talk about is the non-duality of the path of awakening and healing. So awakening, to me, is a recognition of our transcendent presence that is infinite. The nature of consciousness itself has no boundaries. It has no limits. It has no time or space. It has no separation, no individuality. It is boundless. And the nature of embodiment occurs in time, occurs in a differentiation. My body and your body are not the same body as far as the 4 limbs and the head and the 10 fingers and 10 toes. You've got your own. I've got mine. And it's really important that we recognize that. The relative must be respected, but infused with the wisdom of the ultimate. And the more we can come to rest in our body, in our current, present moment experience, the more we become of one nature with that which is immanent in all life. And this feels like perfect love. So on one end, I like to talk about the ascending current. This is the rising of insight. You could talk about the Kundalini rising to the Ajna, the third eye, 6th chakra, or I like to call them gates, the 6th gate, and then opening to the crown, the 7th, as a recognition of infinite presence. And then we have the descending current of immanence. The ascending current is transcendental. The descending current is immanent. And it descends and connects us with the earth, with our mama, with the Great Mother, with all form. And this is the nature of Shaktipat, which is actually means in Sanskrit the descent of the Shakti. So the Shakti is awakened through transcendental immanence, or a transcendental presence, but then it must find its way in and through all the form, all of the spaces of differentiation, and inform each cell of the body, each channel, subtle meridian or nadi of the body. And each of the centers has an awakening that can be experienced and manifested. So awakening to infinite presence, it's the end of doubt. You no longer doubt the divine nature. It's the beginning of the rectification of all of the ancient karmas that made up this form, all the ancient conditionings. And it's not personal. Healing and awakening are not personal. However, awakening shows us that we never need to fear. In the end, we all return. But healing is a process where we look out and our hearts ache for those who have yet to recognize. And we see a world full of turmoil. We see a world full of all kinds of wrong ideas that stem from separation, that stem from fear and greed and lust, and all of the self-centered conditioning that has arisen over beginningless time in the human experience. So this is why in Buddhism they say that in Tibetan Buddhism, in Vajrayana, and in Mahayana Buddhism, that the first step is to develop compassion. Because compassion, not only does it take us out of ourselves, it helps us recognize our non-separation. Because when we're worried about others suffering, it starts to show us that as we let go of our own personal suffering, we suffer less. As we stop perseverating upon our own dissatisfaction, it actually affects us less. And as we focus on the other, we actually have more peace and happiness. That's the first thing. But also, once we have recognized infinite presence, all that remains for us to do is to respond to the world with love and compassion. And so if we already have an understanding of how to do that, we already have practiced that, it becomes easier. If not, then we might resist it. And then we might find ourselves trying to avoid the world's suffering. And that would be a hindrance to our own personal awakening. And also, what else is there to do of value but to serve? So this is a brief introduction to my experience of awakening and how that led me to a deeper understanding of the importance of healing, and how I think that it's value to all of us to begin to bring our awareness to our own body and mind without resisting. Because what happens is, and let me just give a brief introduction to a process of self-inquiry, meditative process of self-inquiry, so you can understand how this can work for those of you who aren't necessarily maybe grokking or following everything I'm saying. So let's say we're in a moment of suffering. We want something, we feel like we don't have something we need, or we are in an aversive circumstance and something's happening that we don't like. And we can't help it, but we feel bad about this. We feel cut off. We feel separated somehow. So we will notice our thoughts about it. We'll notice that we have made these distinctions and that they feel very real. Okay. And that's where we're at. So what I suggest that you do, the invitation, is to recognize the thought and to let it be, and see if you can have space enough of your awareness, this infinite presence, remember, that we're cultivating, space enough in your awareness to let those thoughts be what they are without having to continue the story. So you let them go. If possible, you let them vanish so that your mind becomes blank. And then you'll find there's still quite a lot of potency if you're in a suffering state. There's a lot of potency in your mind and body at the time. So you want to go to that potency, that intensity in the body. And you want to stay with that feeling, the bare naked sensation, whatever it is. Maybe it's a tightness in your gut. Maybe it's an anxiety in your chest. Maybe it's a pain. Maybe it's deep sorrow, deep grief. Maybe you're angry. And you stay with that feeling, whatever it is. You honor it. You recognize it. You invite it into your awareness. You allow it to be what it is without making a story about it. If you can do that, that is compassion. That's self-love. Rather than fighting what is, you allow the experience to be what it is. The more we do this, the more we unite with ourselves, the more we discover the love that underlies the suffering, the love that underlies all sense of separation, all distinction. We begin to recognize that there's something deep to the mind and deep to the body, deep in the heart, that is always shining. You can't get away from it. There's only that, actually. Your body and your mind and the world, it's all a dance. It's the gift of the goddess, the mother. It's the Shakti. Manifestation is the Shakti of the divine play. And she plays upon the canvas of infinite presence. She plays upon the canvas of the dynamic stillness that underlies all movement. We learn to trust that our sense of separation, when we are curious and open to our experience, will take us back to ourselves, back to union. We learn not to resist, and then ultimately, by the grace of the Mother, we find surrender. So that's what I had to share with you. Hopefully it's useful, and I look forward to next time. Until then, peace be with you.